Welcome to the Shine Your Light, Reach Your Best podcast. I'm your host, Claire Thomas. I'm on a mission to support women who feel stuck, unfulfilled and disempowered have a successful, fulfilled, soul-led life. I guide women to reawaken their unique power so they can shine their light and reach their best. This podcast is designed to support and enrich the Shine Your Light, Reach Your Best self-development coaching cards. Thank you for joining me. Now sit back, relax, and let's work out how to shine all our lights brightly. Hi, and welcome to this episode of the Shine Your Light, Reach Your Best podcast. You will see that I'm not on my own today, which is a complete honour and a treat to be joined today by Alyssa. Maybe I can let you introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and I know you're not even in the UK, so which is very exciting as well.
Thank you so much, Claire. Thank you for having me. Yes, my name is Alyssa. I am a maternal wellness advocate. I'm a mom to 2 toddler boys, ages 3 and 2, and I live in Washington State.
Wow, so I didn't ask you before we started recording, but it's pretty early your time, isn't it? It's really
It
early.
is. It's about 5 a.m. right now, and everybody is sleeping.
Yeah, those are the best times of the day, aren't they? Particularly when you've got young kids, when nobody else is up. I absolutely cherish that time of day.
It is. It's so nice. The rest of the world is still sleeping, and I feel like I can actually focus and really get into what I'm doing without constant, lovely interruptions of fighting, needing more milk, all of the things.
Yeah. So how did you get into being an advocate for mums?
So it actually was not something I'd planned. I'd actually never planned on being a mom. So when I found myself entering motherhood, I started to realize and experience firsthand how few resources there are for a lot of moms, especially in really rural communities. I live in a very rural community about 2 hours away from the biggest city. And I realized just what a lack of social support there was, and even information on the challenges of motherhood and how to navigate all of these feelings of inadequacy and guilt and overwhelm, and not feeling like there was a space to talk about it without feeling like I was being a bad mom.
Yeah. I think it's kind of like listening to you, some of the thoughts that come through my mind are kind of in parallel to the experience women have as well when they're going through either maybe trying to conceive or also when they get older and they're starting to go through things like the perimenopause, is that given that 50% of the population are women and childbearing, and with humanity's been around for so long, how can it be so hard to have that information just like available and there for everybody? It feels crazy sometimes.
Yes, I really recognize that, and like one of my first experiences was all of the appointments. Obviously, you have a lot of doctor's appointments leading up to the birth of your baby, and about 2 weeks after my baby was born, I had a follow-up appointment for myself and then my firstborn son, and the doctor asked all these questions about the baby, and I was trying to answer them right and make sure that I was doing the right things. And it was about a 40-minute appointment to check and make sure everything was good with my little guy. And then at the end, the doctor turned to me and said, "And how are you doing?" And I was like, "Well, I can't tell him. I'm overwhelmed and I haven't slept in 3 days, and I'm exhausted. And I don't know what I'm doing because I don't want him to think that I'm already failing as a mother." So I said, "Oh, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good." And he said, "Great." And started to walk out the door. And I said, "Oh, don't I have an appointment to check on how I'm doing too?" And he said, "Oh, you did. We just had it." And that was my experience. And I was like, "Oh, well, I feel like a lot of the time society takes such good care of the mom when the baby is inside of you. And then once the baby's born, it's like, that's it. You're done. You're good. Move on." And there's this whole season of stress and overwhelm, but a lot of women feel like they can't fully unpack that feeling of stress and overwhelm. We just carry on and push
Yeah.
forward
Yeah.
because everybody else has moved on.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's also quite a lot of guilt and shame around actually admitting how hard it can be, because then you feel like you're going to be perceived as a failure, or people are going to think that you're not doing a good job as a parent. And yeah, maybe most of that is potentially stories in your head. I don't know, but I remember when mine were younger, a friend who doesn't live locally, her saying that she met up with her group of we have a thing called NCT, like the National Childbirth Trust or something. So you can form groups of women that are all giving birth around the same sort of time, and then these women stay in touch and support each other. And I remember hearing that she'd shown up to one of these groups, and everybody's like, "Oh, how's it going?" "Oh, yeah, it's great. Little Johnny's doing really well. He's wonderful." And she's like, "I think it's really hard and really difficult." And then suddenly, everybody started being actually honest and authentic about how hard it was and the challenges they were having. But it takes somebody to be really brave just to go out there and say, this is hard.
Mhm. I love that you said that, and the story you shared, I think, is so revealing to, I think many of us are having a hard time.
Yeah.
Life is beautifully messy and beautifully hard. Every season of life has its challenges, and I think it's interesting as human beings that we don't want to show those challenges and those failures because we're doing just fine, and why aren't you doing just fine? And it kind of perpetuates this image that if you're a good mom, you don't get overwhelmed and you should be showing up all the time for your children and for yourself. And this certain image of motherhood with a clean house and perfectly behaved children. And then when you see the flip end of that on social media, it's almost perceived as a joke and something to laugh about, like the
Yeah.
mom wine culture,
Yeah.
which I think is really such a big deep cry for help of, I know
Yeah.
you think this is funny and I'm presenting it in a funny way, but this is really my generation and younger generations, this cry for help
Yeah.
of these needs that aren't being addressed or met.
Yeah. Yeah. So how are you addressing or helping this problem? Share us a little bit of, because I know that you've done some amazing things. So
Oh, thank you, Claire. I think my first thing is I wrote a book. It's called Mommy Needs a Minute from Burnout to Empowerment. And it talks about each chapter focuses on the different areas that moms usually feel overwhelmed and burned out. So there's information burnout, body burnout, career burnout, identity burnout, mental health burnout. And each chapter kind of talks about how a personal antidote of how I felt burnt out in that area. And
yeah.
then the social research on why and how society can kind of perpetuate this burnout
Mm.
in inadvertent ways that we internalize these pressures to perform. And then some tips and small habits you can implement in your life to start reducing the burnout in those areas.
It's amazing. It sounds like something that everybody should almost get on prescription when they're like, here, you're pregnant, have this book, forget what to expect when you're expecting, this is the book you need to actually survive parenthood.
Thank you, Claire. I think it's nice to have it. The goal in writing it was to make it accessible, short, but enough information that people feel like they walked away with some tools under
Yeah.
their belt.
Yeah.
And that's been good.
And how did the idea come about of writing a book? Is that something that you've always wanted to do, or was it the situation that motivated you to just pick up a pen or pull out the computer and start typing away?
I have my master's degree in English, so I love language.
Wow.
And then
Yeah.
I have undergraduate degrees in anthropology, linguistics, and communication. So
Yeah.
I love language, and I love how language really stems from our social and historical context and background. And I think so much of human behavior and the words we choose to use and the way we present ourselves is really steeped and saturated in social norms that
Yeah.
can go back for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Um, So, like, for example, I was doing research, and mom guilt is something that's been around since ancient Roman times. It's a
Mm,
something that women have experienced since really the first recorded instances of motherhood. That
wow.
feeling of inadequacy and not being enough and not doing right by your children. And then it's just continued to be perpetuated and exasperated in the age of information with social
Yeah,
media, where it's easier to compare.
yeah,
Um, but I started writing a book because I love language, and I saw I was working through a lot of these areas of burnout and exhaustion in my own life. I had a couple of huge aha moments early on in
mm,
my parenting journey, and I started writing just for my own sake
mm,
the processes I was going through to try and
mm.
undo all this guilt and work through it, and all this burnout I was experiencing in my life. And my husband was like, "You should share this with other women who might be feeling the same
Yeah,
way."
yeah, yeah. That's absolutely amazing. And how has the journey you been on, like of being a parent and also writing the book, influence the way that you now parent your boys? Because one, they're still young, so there's still plenty
Mhm.
plenty of time, but also you have, yeah, I believe you said you had two boys, so that's, I imagine, in some respects, going back to your anthropology studies, that it's the maybe the words and the beliefs that society have for the role of men and women is also very different.
It really has. I love that you bring that up. It really has impacted my parenting and my approach. I think one of the biggest things that's universal, whether you have little boys, little girls, is to parent authentically, to parent from a place that resonates with who you are, and the person that you are growing and developing and striving to emulate. I think that a lot of the times we adopt parenting habits that we think look good, and they don't
Mm,
really work well with our family or our children
yeah,
or even ourselves. And then we
yeah,
get to this place of burnout and disconnect, and we think something's wrong with us. We're terrible parents. And the reality is, we're just not parenting from a place of authenticity.
yeah.
And there's so many ways to parent, and each way to parent is just as unique as your amazing child that you're trying to raise well.
Yeah, I love that point. And I think the one of the skills that I think it would be so useful for everybody to have, like humanity to have, is that ability of non-judgment and acceptance. Accept everybody for who they are and for their unique qualities, and to not judge people, just to let people be who they are. We don't need to judge somebody else's choices because we have no idea about the context in which they're making those choices. um, and I just think, yeah, if there was more awareness of these behaviors, it would make such a big difference.
Yes, and I love that you say that because I think it's something I touch on in the book, where a lot of the times this deep need to judge other parents is actually us feeling the need to judge ourselves through
Yeah,
the lens of how they're parenting. And when somebody parents differently than you do, it
yeah,
challenges all of your own decisions and makes you
yeah,
feel insecure about the way you're parenting. So you're really not judging them, you're judging
yeah,
yourself through
yeah,
their actions.
yeah, yeah. And that's definitely not something I was aware of, um, in the first, I don't know how many years of having children. It's something that I've come to learn. I think I learned that more. It was mindfulness that opened that gateway for me. Just that ability to pause in the moment when you feel stressed and overwhelmed, and to then look at what's going on. Um, and then I remember when I realized the role that judgment had had in my life, that I was actually quite shocked. And it's a habit, it's a really strong habit to get out of as well.
It
If you've
is.
grown up being taught and society teaches you to judge, then that's what you do because you don't know any different.
And I love that you say it's such a strong habit to break because it's a default, especially when you
Yeah,
judge your own value and self-worth
yeah,
by comparing to other people and being like, well, my kid might have thrown a tantrum, but it's not as bad as so and so over there at the
yeah,
park. Did you
yeah,
see what happened with them? And
yeah,
we do that a lot, and I think it comes from a deep-rooted place of feeling not enough and
Yeah,
insecure, and so it's easier to judge others and point
yeah,
out their flaws than to really address all of the hurt going on inside of us.
yeah, yeah. No, exactly. I love these sorts of topics. I think they're just like, yeah, just they're really important. Actually, they have the power to make really big changes, and it's important that people have these discussions. And maybe somebody listens to this and they notice that they are judging in their lives, and maybe that stops them in their tracks a little bit, and they, maybe give a bit more space to behavior. um
Yes, and it is our words are so powerful, and I
yeah,
do believe that what we think and what we speak is what we can pull into existence, and
yeah,
even if it's not actually taking place the way we think it is, our mind and our narratives are so powerful that
yeah,
it will trick us into believing that it is taking place the way
exactly.
we're telling us it
Yeah,
is. So, I
yeah,
love that you said to use mindfulness. I
yeah,
think that's such a powerful tool in so many areas of your life, and
totally. Yeah.
I talk to a lot of moms who say, "Well, I don't have time for mindfulness." Like, and
Yeah,
I usually tell people, like, as somebody who worked a 60-hour work week and was a stay-at-home mom with a partner who was gone 10 days at a time,
yeah,
like, you find time for the things that matter, and the
yeah,
problem is that you don't think you matter enough to
yeah,
find the time for you. And I think even on the days where I don't have time to get up 15 minutes early and meditate or practice mindfulness, throughout the day when my children are having big emotions over something like a spilled glass of milk, I have
yeah,
to remind myself this isn't a life or death situation. The milk sits on the floor for 5 minutes. It's okay. And
yeah,
yeah, and I tell my boys, mommy me is feeling very X. I'm feeling very overwhelmed.
yeah,
I'm feeling very stressed. And I'll tell them, see, my heart's beating really hard. And see,
yeah,
I'm feeling anxious. And then I tell them,
yeah,
mommy's gonna take a minute, 5 minutes to breathe and calm down, and we'll take care of the milk in a minute. And I'll stand there with them, or I'll go into the next room for a minute and I'll
yeah,
breathe, and they know to give me my space for a minute.
yeah.
And the beautiful thing is, I see my 3-year-old starting to do that too. He'll say,
Love it.
"I'm feeling very," whatever he
Yeah,
identifies as his
yeah,
emotion, and he
yeah.
goes, "I'm gonna breathe for a minute," and he'll sit there and and I'm like, "Do you feel better, buddy?"
Yeah, yeah. And I think, I mean, again, I mean, I know I can say I wish I'd been able to do that when mine were that little. I mean, it is all as it is, and as it's meant to be. But I do know that for, at least the past 5 years, having that in my daily practice has changed my parenting massively. And I know that the girls, because I've got two girls, I know that they've benefited from that. I can see that as well. When pre mindfulness days, if we'd have had a spilt glass of milk, I would have been rushing around trying to get it cleared up, shouting. Somebody would be crying, and would have been a complete mess. Now I'm so chilled about when something gets spilt. I wonder that it ever gets cleared up. So, oh well, that was my favourite mug. Whatever. There's another one in the cupboard. Doesn't matter. And it's like I'm just so like slow to respond negatively that I don't respond negatively. That it's like, wow, what a difference. But it's taken time, but it's so worth it. And I think the pressures that teenagers and when they get to school and they have all the social pressure of their peers and exams and all these sorts of things, to have these skills in place where you can stop and understand that breathing will help, and that it's never going to be the end of the world. It's very rarely a life or death situation. These are like the best skills to learn ever.
Yeah, and I think it's amazing that you said it changes your parenting dynamic. It doesn't just change yourself, it's changed
Yeah,
the atmosphere of your home.
yeah,
And I think so many times women especially were so self-sacrificing by nature, and
yeah,
we're like, I can't take it's selfish for me to take this time for myself. Why on
yeah,
earth would I do that when my kids need me and my spouse needs me and the house needs cleaning and work? I need to go to work. And of
yeah,
course, there's responsibilities. And I'm not just saying to abandon all of your responsibilities, but your home will change when you change. I feel like the mother of the house, you hold so much power to control the aura and atmosphere of your home. And if
Yeah,
you're out of balance with yourself, your whole home is out of balance within itself.
yeah,
And it really is the most selfless thing you can do,
yeah.
investing in yourself.
Totally, totally. And I just, yeah, it's the best thing. I mean, it shows up in all areas of your life. If you give yourself the time to slow down and to look after yourself, actually what ends up happening is that you can still do everything else, but you just do it quicker and more efficiently because you're not wasting time getting distracted and doing things that aren't important. The 15 minutes of meditation is worth way more than 15 minutes of doing time. The recharge of it is incredible.
I I agree, and I was curious to ask you, like, now that you've entered into this new season where you feel more mindful and positive, how do you feel like that's impacted not just your parenting, but other areas of your life?
I mean, it's totally changed the way that I approach work, and I've been going through another shift on it even just recently. I have a natural tendency to want to work hard and to get things done and succeed. But I now realize that actually it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. And it's a shift that's still in place. But like as an example, just yesterday, I maybe started work at 8 o'clock in the morning, but by 11:30, I said to myself, I'm pretty sure I've done enough for my business today. I don't need to do any more. It's going to be okay. I've done all the things that are the most important to do today, and went and did some creative activities, sat at a sewing machine and made some patchwork. And that then filled me up and recharged me. And that sort of balance in the day between being and doing was so much more aligned than before, when it would have been so much more heavily skewed to just doing all day.
And I think that's such a beautiful example. I love how you said being and doing. I
Yeah,
think a lot of times in parenting, we think it's all about doing, doing, doing.
yeah,
And it's such a disservice we do to ourselves and to our children who are watching
yeah,
us, and
yeah,
equating that. My I remember in the early days, my little guy saying to me, I basically, me love being little. It's like, me love being little. Because when you get big, he goes, all you do is work, 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 work.
yeah,
And and I was like, oh, I'm modeling for him that it's not
yeah,
okay to just be. It's not okay to
yeah,
just be present and to sit down and enjoy. But life is something that you just work, work, work through all the time.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and it was a great reminder that they're watching us. This was when I think he was barely two, and so it was garbled little, barely 2-year-old
yeah,
language.
yeah,
Um, and it really reminded me to just sit down and be present, and how they are at such from the time they're born, they're learning how to interact with the world and society through what we're doing.
yeah,
And so if you say to your child, slow down and enjoy life, but you're over here doing 180 an
yeah.
hour, they're they're
Exactly.
like, okay.
Yeah, yeah. And the example that comes to mind when listening to you there is I have lots of friends and clients who um, feel, and this does apply more to women, that they need to do so much for their children. So take the example of maybe their homework. They're struggling with their homework. It's natural to want to help your child, but do you want to? You can't be your child for them. You can't go to school for them and get their grades and sit the exam. So would you rather do all these things for them, or would you rather be the one that is there as their parent and be the one that they can come home and talk to and release all of that frustration to? I know which one I would prefer. I much and I think if you can be the parent rather than do the parent, then your relationship with them is going to be better. Um I believe that many of the problems parents have when their kids become teenagers and want to have that freedom is because they want to control their teenagers too much. And then that's when all the retaliation starts. Whereas if you're there to provide the emotional support, and they always know it's okay to come and tell you something and they won't be judged, and there's very rarely a worse that's going to happen, that feels so much better to me.
I think that's beautifully stated, and I think you hit such a key point there. It's the relationship, whether your child is 1 month old or whether they're 16, it's that relationship and realizing I can't control whether my baby cries through the night or not. I can show up as my best self, but I can't control them. I can't control what grades they get. And I think this deep desire for control stems from our own insecurities, our wanting to make things to be the best for them. And when as a parent you realize life is going to beat your kid up a little bit, like nobody goes through life unscathed. And it's okay. It's going to build. What you want to instill in your children is not that they never experience hard things, but they have the tools within themselves to experience those hard things and develop a strength of character and a resilience and a commitment to themselves and an advocacy for themselves. And if you've instilled that in a parent, I feel like you feel empowered to release that control, because even if bad things come their way, which it will, it's just part of life, then they're capable of handling it, not because you're there handling it for them, but because you've given them the tools to handle it themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. So what plans, where do you go next with your work, and what sort of impact are you looking to have?
Thank you. I think one of the biggest things that I'm working on right now is to develop an organization with a good dear friend of mine. We're working on something called High Five Thrive. It's an organization by parents, dedicated for parents, and it's all about helping to create a space for moms and dads as well to get a lot of support that they need that's currently lacking in our society. So we're working on initiatives like making mental health more accessible to working parents, and also stay-at-home parents who might not have the time or the funds during traditional business hours to access mental health care. And then as well as things like women, stay-at-home moms who struggle to re-enter the workforce, who feel like their value and their identity has been reduced down to just motherhood, and how challenging that can be to kind of give up all those other aspects and passions of yourself. So we're looking at partnering with small women-owned businesses, doing like mommy burnout boxes, and helping to send things to moms who need that burnout boost, as well as encouraging small women-owned businesses that as far as financially blessing them. So there's quite a few things we have going on in the works.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. And all that is with having 2 young children to look after as well. It's incredible what we can actually achieve, isn't it?
Yes, and it's amazing when we enter into it. I love what you said of just being instead of constantly doing. I can really empathize with what you said about just always being very productive and always wanting to be the best and do more and really strive. And I could easily be a workaholic. But I realized how much I'm like, oh, life is so beautiful when I slow down. I enjoy each day so much more. And if I get 2 things done off my list before they wake up, 2 things is great. And if I get nothing done because it was a rough day, I'm still okay. Things are still moving forward, and I'm still valuable and accomplishing things. And it's my biggest accomplishment today was motherhood, which is the heart of everything I do right now in this season anyway.
Yeah. And I really like that point, because I think we often forget that motherhood is a huge accomplishment. I mean, it's such a big thing. And if there are times in that whole phase where you're always, once you're a mum, you're always a mum, obviously, but there are phases where you're more needed to be a mum, and others when you're not. But it is a huge accomplishment, and I think that we don't acknowledge ourselves enough for that, because it's an incredible, beautiful thing.
Yes, and I think that's such a beautiful point to all the moms. You're literally shaping the future. You want to change the world. You're doing it every day in your home.
Yeah,
That is one of the biggest opportunities you have to mentor and breathe life and shape the
yeah,
future for the next 18 years. And it sounds funny. I am a huge advocate for taking time for yourself, for having an identity outside of motherhood. But I
totally.
think the focus should be on, at this season of life, the focus should be on this incredible mission that you've been given for the next 18 years.
Yeah,
And every woman I talk to who has put that second and has put career or other productivity and achievements ahead of that, I have yet to talk to someone who doesn't regret it and
yeah,
doesn't look back and say, "Oh, Alyssa, enjoy these years," because the days
yeah,
are slow and the years are so fast.
yeah, yeah. And that's so true. So true. So I will put in the show notes the link to your books. I know that it's available on Amazon. But what's the best way for people to reach out for you if they want to get in touch, find out more about your High Five Drive?
Thrive, yes.
Great name.
Oh, thank you. So if you want to get in touch, I'm most active on Facebook. It's Facebook and then Alyssa Brade author. You can find me there. I love chatting with people about their parenting journeys.
Yeah,
So please reach out anytime, even if it's just to talk about what's going on in your life. I always love to lend a listening ear. And I'm no psychologist, I'm no expert, but I do, as one mom to another, I do love
yeah.
to relate and empathize and give you whatever resources I can for where you're going in your journey.
Oh, it's absolutely beautiful. Thank you. I really, really appreciate you joining me today, and I've really enjoyed talking to you. And I'm sure that there will be many more opportunities to do so in the future as well.
Yes, thank you, Claire. I loved our conversation. I really appreciate you spending some time with me today.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Shine Your Light, Reach Your Best podcast. Your support is greatly appreciated, so please follow the show. I'd love you to like, comment and share this episode with anyone else whose light needs some help shining. I'd love to hear from you, and I'm open to having guests on my podcast. So if you would like to share your story, please send me an email to claire@reachingmybest.com or click on the link in the show notes. So for now, keep shining and reaching for your best.